Morning, everybody. Last night at our centering prayer group, which is a form of meditation in which we try to quiet our minds, many of us, observed that we were having a not very successful evening at quieting our minds. And by that I mean, even though we're trying to think less, breathe more slowly, focus in maybe on just one word or phrase, what happens is we're just thinking. And this, frankly, is the way life is for most of us most of the time. Few are the masters, and I am not among them, that can control their thoughts to a very high degree, the quantity and the quality. But we can all do a little better at it. And if we're going to think all the time, let's maybe try to reprogram those thoughts into a more positive place. It's like a practical, if we can't be perfect, let's at least be a little bit better. So if we're going to obsess constantly, and I and many of us do, we're always thinking, and usually it's the same thought repeating, let's maybe ask ourselves to obsess on more positive things, to remind ourselves to break away from the negative, especially when we keep rethinking the same thing again and again, and it goes into a cycle of negativity. We have to break it consciously and say, stop. And one way that I'm sure you heard of before is to go to a place of gratitude, however simple or brief or artificial it might be at first, just to say, thank you. Try to think of something you're thankful for. I have a little story to illustrate this. A church member in Jessup, Georgia, and she's really a sweet, kind, beloved woman, your classic upper middle class Southerner who had lived only in Jessup, Georgia, and Washington, D.C. most of her life. She'd grown up in an even smaller town further away from Jessup. And that little town matters in this story because in her late 60s, after, leaving she's a professional life, she'd been married to a politician, used to living at an upper middle class level. She confided in me, and then I have her permission to share this story, by the way, because she shared it in a supper song and praise message and said, use it if you ever want to. But in 2007, a family friend recommended she go pretty all in with a lot of her retirement money on a housing project that was just the best he'd ever seen. And of course, 2007, housing projects didn't do that well. And she thought even if it didn't perform that well, she'd be okay. So she did kind of go all in and found herself about 90% poorer than she thought she would be in her late 60s. And what she was talking to me was, she goes, I think I'm going to move back to the little baby town where I was born and move into my mother's house, because her mother just died recently, and sell my house here in Jessup, which is worth more, and that way I'll have something to live on. And I could see the sadness in her eyes of talking about going back to a place where she hadn't lived for 60 years and didn't know anybody at all. The only person she had known there was her mother, now dead, few acquaintances. You could see her lack of enthusiasm about moving to this town, and just, she thought not having enough, that this would be the fiscally prudent thing to do. So we talked a bit more, and I finally said, let's call her Jane. Jane, this seems to be all about money. Am I hearing that right? She goes, yeah, this would be a financially driven decision, to take the money out of my nice house here in Jessup and move it to the smaller house. And I said, well, it doesn't sound like that much money is what's forcing this decision. And she said, it really isn't. It's a matter of maybe $100,000. And right that second, I got this idea. It wasn't my own, it just sort of came to me. And I said, okay, Cynthia, let's play a game. Tomorrow, you go to the Regions Bank, a nice Southern bank, and you discover that a benevolent God or an earthly creature who is totally anonymous has put $1 million in your bank account. Now tell me, please, what you would do to life. She goes, well, I'd stay right here in this house, and I would not move to the little town. And I'd say, that's great. She goes, I guess I'd try to figure out a way to thank that anonymous donor, or somehow I thank God for getting the $1 million in the account. I said, so there's no reason to go except for the money. And she said, no. I said, okay, well, let's start believing in that earthly and heavenly provision. Let's start seeing that that blessing can be there, and you don't need to move from fear or worry or over caution. Well, as luck would have it, she discovered it wasn't quite as bad as she thought the initial loss would be. And she even started looking at her life, which I didn't recommend. I knew she was a smart enough woman. She'd figure out, for instance, that she had her mom's cool old Lincoln Continental, one of those boat kind that was like 7 feet wide and 25 feet long. She didn't need that, and her Buick Enclave. A woman who drove 300 miles a month did not need a brand new luxury SUV and a cool old classic car. And she, in fact, got rid of the Buick and kept her mom's cool car. And just did a few little things and stayed in Jessup, Georgia, where she still lives happily to this day. But what we also did in that conversation is we broke her away from her fear and obsession of like, oh no, 50 years of hard work and sacrifice I have just dumped. I don't have anything. You see, the obsession was bad, 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 lack, lack, lack. And in less than an hour's conversation, we went back to where she sort of naturally is. This is a good, grateful, positive human being. We had to just get her back obsessing on what was right. And this is what I'm inviting everybody to do today. If you're going to think nonstop like we all do about everything, every now and then when you're thinking, I don't like Donald Trump or Joe Biden, or I don't like the fact that it's 117 degrees some of these afternoons in Nevada. Well, you know, there's a lot of things we're not excited about. Right at that moment, say, wow, I'm glad for my best friend that I've had for 50 years. It's amazing how close we are. I'm glad that I never, ever have to worry about, even if it is 118 degrees in Las Vegas, when I walk into my apartment, it's anything other than 74. And that feels nice every time. I am so grateful to God that I've got blank, a car that's paid for, the greatest spouse in the universe. Just break the obsession and start obsessing on something that is a blessing for which you easily and joyfully feel gratitude. It's just a simple matter. Catch yourself when you're going to that negative place. You're watching these retarded channels on cable that call themselves news, but it's not. It's just all foolish commentary. And this or left or right. Here's what they all have in common. Foolish. And they are not your friend. They're getting you to obsess on fear and negativity and to make you buy prescriptions you don't need and Ford 150 trucks. They're all selling the same junk. And what it is fear, misery, and obsession on what you don't have, on not having enough, things not being good enough. God is great, and there is enough in your life, and you have reasons, everybody, that's to be grateful and happy. And we can just tell ourselves to get in a better and more frequent habit of expressing that gratitude. On that topic, let's end with Psalm 100, which has a lot of joy and a lot of gratitude in it. Psalm 100. Be joyful in the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness and come before his presence with a song. Know this, the Lord himself is God. He himself has made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Go into God's courts with praise. Give thanks to him and call upon his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his faithfulness endures from age to age. And everything's gonna be fine in your life and wonderful. You will have enough. God will provide you with love, with everything you need. Live in the gratitude of that now and always. That's what I got to say today. Thank you. God bless.